So a lot of what I want to talk about today stems from the word development, right? To take something from whatever state it's currently in, whatever condition you find it, and to make it better, to progress it further. Adventurers as a program falls into the development category because we acknowledge that the journey of life, the process of growing, doesn't stop when you reach the age of 9, despite what your 9-year-old might tell you. They still have a lot of growing to do past that point. So when we talk about adventurers, it's important to recognize it as part of one of the many pieces of the puzzle when it comes to making up who a person is. It's part of the developmental process. The aim is to take the person in whatever condition they might be in and to progress them on their journey just that little bit further. And so if you're sitting there as an adventurer, hi guys, or as a parent of an adventurer, or as someone who isn't involved in adventurers at all, potentially as somebody who's just heard of what adventurers is right now, you can know that these principles of development apply to you wherever you are at. The mindset of an adventurer is not just for the 4 to 9-year-olds, it's for everybody. We choose to focus on the adventurer age group because the research tells us that this particular stage of life is one of the most critical, not only for physical and mental growth, but for worldview development as well. During the early formative years, a child at that point has its largest capacity for learning at any stage. Compared with any other stage of life, when you're in that age group, in your earliest years are your largest capacity for learning. As your brain is developing, you will do the most learning during this time in terms of your overall knowledge acquired. You will do most of it in that early stage of life. Yes, you'll go to school and potentially university later on and learn a lot, but in terms of your capacity to grow and develop and your ability to absorb information, that will occur mostly when you're a really, really little kid. Those of you who have kids in this age group, or potentially even when you're interacting with kids in that age group, you'll notice the incredible amount of questions that will come up during this time, right? This is fueled by a desire to know how the world works and the remarkable capacity then of the child to sort through that information and file it away. I still amaze my mum every now and then by remembering things from the childhood that at the time were insignificant, but were still stored away and filed in my brain and came up later on. As an example, if you're a child who's grown up in the city, right? So like you've got a psychologist. His name was Jean Piaget, right? We learned about him in high school. He mapped out important factors that contribute to the development of a person over time. One of these factors he called cognitive equilibration, or equilibration. I honestly am not sure how to pronounce it properly. I didn't do particularly well in that class. But it refers to the need, from a developmental perspective, to make sense of the world around us. Okay, we're trying to match up all of the different pieces of information that come into our lives. We're trying to make it all fit, make it make sense. And so we need to ensure that when we are confronted with new information, that it makes sense with the information that we already have. Otherwise, we have a problem. Otherwise, we have an issue. Right? So if you're a kid and you've grown up in the city and you're used to seeing cars all of the time, you might find yourself in the country one day and you see a tractor, right, for the first time ever. And you might go up to your parents and be like, hey, look, there's a car, pointing at the tractor, right? Because you've never seen a tractor before. You have no frame of reference. And so this particular thing that you've seen, well, it has wheels, there's a person driving it, there's a steering wheel, right? That tractor is a car, according to your definition of a car. And you believe that until you're told otherwise, until your parents go, actually, no, that's not a car, that's a tractor. And then, mind blown as a kid, you're like, oh my goodness, there's so many different possibilities. What is a car? What isn't a car? This new information, it messes with your head's ability to process the incoming information. And so when we're presented with a situation like this, right, our 3 options are, we can either ignore the new information and just pretend that tractors don't exist. We can try and adjust the facts and convince them ourselves that there's no discrepancy. We can be like, oh no, maybe the tractor's wheels aren't as big as I think, and it definitely is a car. Or we can adjust our worldview to fit with the new information. We can say, oh okay, so tractors and cars, they're 2 different things. This is what a tractor is, this is what a car is. And so you see this sort of thing happen all the time, even to adults. When somebody gets presented with new information that doesn't fit with their current model of thinking, we run into issues. And as we get older, the chances that we will come across information that doesn't fit with what we already know increases, right? As we interact with more people, as we, interact with the world, as we go to school, learn more things about how the world works. And so the point is, you do a better job of increasing the developmental process. You do a better job of progressing them further to develop the child more if you don't dumb down the concepts. You do a better job of accelerating their learning if you present them with things as they are. You maintain that equilibration, fancy word, if you present them with things as they are instead of dumbing it down for them as a child and then forcing them to try and change as they grow up. So isn't it then important that from a young age, right from the beginning, right from the adventurer age group, that we establish the truth, we establish the whole truth. We train them up in the way that they should go, and so that when they're old, they won't go another way. Right? There's a reason why the Bible writes that verse in Proverbs. Right? This has been backed up by science. Picture having a habit, picture having knowledge as like a jungle. Right? Every time you want to practice the habit, you have to cross through the jungle and get to the other side. So the first time you do it, it's quite difficult. It takes a long time. You've got to get your machete, you've got to hack away at all the trees, you've got to forge your own way through. But then the next time you do it, right, you've got to walk through the same jungle. Well, it's a little bit easier because somebody's already gone through and hashed away all the trees and, there's a little bit of a path. You do that over and over and over again, and eventually, after a really long time, you'll walk through that jungle and it will just be a clear path for you. It's incredibly easy, right? This is why we say practice makes perfect. But when it comes to changing a preformed habit, you have to forge a completely new path through that same jungle, right? It's not easy because you've got to break off the rusty machete that you haven't used in a while. And your brain is so used to walking through that jungle in a particular way that if you try and deviate, it's very, very difficult and very, very hard. And so when our brains are young, when our brains are developing, when we're picking up all these new habits and processing all of this new information, it's so important that we learn the correct way the first time. It's important that you grow up in the right way so that when you're older, it's so much easier. And this principle doesn't just apply to kids, because although the younger ages are the ones that are developing and making up the most paths in their life, right? Now is always the best time to start forming a new habit, right? It's never too late. You can teach an old dog new tricks. You can forge a new path through the jungle. And now is the best time to start. And once it's formed, it's very easy to stay on that path. Picking up habits is very easy, and it doesn't come as much from rewards or from discipline as we might think. In fact, the easiest way we learn, our primary mode of learning, what we learn the most things of, regardless of our age, is actually through observing. It's through modeling other people's behavior. The best way that our brain acquires new knowledge is by seeing or watching somebody do the thing that we want to do. And there are so many implications for this as a mode of learning, right? Because the chances, there are so many, it's incredible how influential we can be on other people without even realizing it. You don't know who you're being an example to at any point. You don't know who's watching you. You don't know who might be learning from you. The chances of us picking up a behavior from somebody else increases if we admire the person that we're watching. This is why advertising companies will frequently use celebrities as a way to get you to do the thing that they want you to do. Because you're supposed to anyway. You respect and admire the person on the TV that's telling you to do the thing. So you're more likely to replicate that behavior. And so how important is it then to make sure that we ourselves are good influences, right? That we are an influential part of other people's lives. Whether you're mum or dad, whether you're a mentor or even a friend, making sure that we have a good connection with people is key to influencing their behavior, and not in a toxic, manipulative way, but in a positive, for the kingdom mindset. The other side to learning by observing is that not only are our physical behaviors noted and copied, but also our attitudes to certain things. Our enthusiasm and excitement, or our sadness, our anger, our negativity, they'll all be picked up on and replicated. And this again is why it's so important for all of us, regardless of our age, to be a good example, not just in word, not just in deed, but in attitude. Because what we act like now will be expanded on more in the next generation. As a biblical example, we can look at 2 Kings chapter 22. I don't have the verse up on the screen, so you either have to turn that in your Bibles or trust me, either or. 2 Kings chapter 22, right? The story of one of Israel's youngest kings. If you go to 1 Kings, it's the next one. 1 Kings is like towards the front of the Bible. Like Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and then 2 Kings. Chapter 22, the story of one of Israel's youngest kings. Israel had a habit of putting forward leaders at a really young age, apparently. This particular king's name was Josiah. He was just 8 years old when he became king. So the builders class is the 8-year-olds. Who's in builders? Nice. Do you want to be king? Yeah. I reckon you'd be a good king too, actually. Right? He is the age of an adventurer when he comes into office. And yet, Josiah is noted as being a very good king for Israel. In verse 2 of chapter 22, it says, "He did what was pleasing in the eyes of the Lord and followed the example of his ancestor David. He did not turn away from doing what was right." Right? Notice this. He followed the example of David. As a young boy, while he was still developing, he was able to look at previous good examples of kings to figure out what he should be doing. And so the lesson then for us is to not only to be that good example as best we can, but also to provide kids in this developmental stage of life, this important and critical stage, a place, a space to get those examples. This is what Adventurers is all about, providing the space where you can receive a good example. Never before has it been more important to have a space where we can have positive, truthful, and educational spaces for young people. And so this task of being that example, holding that space and providing good development is what Adventurers is all about. The focus of the club is definitely on the kids, but the vision behind it actually extends to far beyond just the kids, right? It extends to the family, and I believe it spills out into the entire church as well. The Adventurer logo you can see in the bottom of the screen there, it shows two parents guiding their child towards the cross, right? There to represent Jesus. Because the aim of all of this is to guide people to God, bring people closer to Jesus, to develop their spiritual walk. And so the reason why it's worthwhile having a World Adventurer Day, to get a cardio workout when we're singing songs, is to invest in the next generation, to show enthusiasm for singing praises to God, to show enthusiasm for investing in the next generation. Because if you're guiding somebody towards Jesus, then you yourself are getting closer to Jesus. It's not just the child in that logo that's getting closer, it's also the parents. They're leading each other. And so this applies to everybody. Romans chapter 10, verse 14, it says, "How then can they call on the one that they have not believed in?" Right? How can they believe in the one that they haven't heard of? How can they hear unless somebody tells them? Right? This verse highlights the significance and the importance of these sort of programs. We can't expect that the next generation will grow up and stay in the church if we don't provide them this sort of space. How can we expect them to have a good relationship with God if they don't know who He is? I love the way the NLT puts it. It says, how can they call on Him? That's Jesus, right? How can they call on Jesus to save them unless they believe in Him? And how can they believe in Him if they have never heard about Him? And how can they hear unless somebody tells them? The responsibility of telling them about God is the commission that we've all been given from God. When Jesus said to make disciples of all nations, that includes all ages, even the ones at home. They might not be in a faraway mission field in another country. They might be in the local church, and it's important to invest in the local mission right here. And so my charge to you as a church, as a collective group, is to raise these young adventurers, these young people before you in the right way, to be a good example to them in word, in deed, and in attitude for all things, to train them up in the right way to go, so that when they're older, they won't go another way. And my charge to you adventurers, whether you're at home, at school, or at play, learning to be honest, kind, and true, to be like Jesus through and through. Because at the end of the day, I am, you are, we all are adventurers. Mic drop.